At 6 a.m., when the first gray light crept through the razor-wired windows of Black Ridge Federal Penitentiary, a guard named Harold Pike noticed something that made the back of his neck tighten. Cell 317 was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that felt engineered. The man inside that cell was supposed to be awake by then. Everyone in Black Ridge knew it. He was known for never sleeping past dawn, for tapping messages in code through the pipes, for murmuring instructions into contraband phones hidden in hollowed-out law books. His name was Elias Cade, and by the time Pike realized the silence was wrong, the most dangerous prison escape in modern history had already been unfolding for 6 hours. 200 miles away, at 12:01 a.m., a private jet had lifted off from a forgotten airstrip in northern Nevada, with its transponder deliberately disabled, sliding into the sky like a ghost. On board sat 3 men who had never been arrested, never been photographed, never been connected to anything on paper, and yet every one of them answered to Elias Cade. One of them checked a slim black phone, saw a single word appear on the screen, midnight, and nodded. That was the signal that Black Ridge was blind. Inside the prison, the cameras that fed into the central control room continued to show the same looping footage they always did. Empty corridors, locked doors, guards making their rounds. But it was a lie, a recorded lie that Cade's network had been feeding the system for weeks. Somewhere in a utility room 2 floors below cell 317, a thumb drive the size of a fingernail sat plugged into a maintenance port, running a video loop so perfect that not even the system's own diagnostic software could detect it. Elias Cade had been in prison for 7 years, convicted of financial crimes that had collapsed 2 major banks and erased more than $1 billion from the global markets. Officially, he was finished. In reality, prison was just the place where his empire had become invisible. At 12:17 a.m., a young inmate named Marco Ruiz walked past cell 317 carrying a mop bucket, his eyes fixed straight ahead, his hands shaking so slightly they barely disturbed the surface of the murky water inside. Beneath the bucket's false bottom was a bundle of wires, a small cutting torch, and a folded prison uniform that did not belong to him. When he reached the corner, a section of wall that everyone believed was solid slid open by ½ an inch, just enough for a hand to reach out and pull the bucket through. That hand belonged to Cade. He was 43 years old, lean to the point of looking fragile, with hair that had gone prematurely gray and eyes that never stopped calculating. For months, he had pretended to be sick, to be weak, to be a man whose time had already passed. He coughed blood in front of the guards. He walked with a limp. He let rumors spread that he was dying. But every night after lights out, he stood in the dark of his cell and worked. The wall behind his bunk had been slowly carved away, using a tool made from the motor of a confiscated toothbrush and a strip of sharpened steel. The debris had been hidden inside hollowed-out books, then quietly thrown away over weeks in the prison trash. Behind that wall was an unused maintenance shaft that hadn't been on any blueprint since the prison was expanded in the 1970s. Cade had found it by bribing a retired engineer on the outside, a man who never knew what he had given up when he sold those old plans for $50,000 in unmarked bills. At 12:31 a.m., Cade slipped into the shaft, pulling the wall closed behind him so perfectly that even a trained eye wouldn't have known it had ever moved. The air inside was thick with dust and the metallic smell of old pipes. Somewhere far above, a guard laughed at a joke, unaware that a man the government believed was caged was now crawling free through the skeleton of the prison itself. As Cade moved through the darkness, he murmured numbers under his breath, not prayers, but timings, checkpoints he had memorized so completely they lived in his bones. He knew that at 12:43 a.m., a maintenance crew would begin its scheduled break in the lower generator room. He knew that at 12:44 a.m., The East Corridor cameras would flicker for exactly 6 seconds as the system ran a routine self-check. He had designed those glitches himself months earlier, using a hacked tablet smuggled in by a guard who thought he was being paid to look the other way for cigarettes. By 12:45 a.m., Cade reached a vertical ladder that led up to a steel hatch bolted from the inside. He paused, listening. The prison was a living machine, full of groans and distant footsteps and the faint hum of electricity. But beneath all of it, there was another rhythm, the rhythm of a plan that was still on track. He unscrewed the hatch with practiced ease, lifted it just enough to slip through, and emerged into the narrow crawl space above the east wing. At 1:02 a.m., a delivery truck rolled up to the outer security gate, its headlights cutting through the fog that always seems to cling to Black Ridge at night. The paperwork it carried was perfect, down to the smallest serial number, and the driver was a man whose face had been digitally altered in every database on Earth. He was there to pick up medical waste, and the guards waved him through without a second glance. Inside that truck, hidden behind sealed red containers, was a full set of civilian clothes, a biometric passport, and a weapon that had been broken down into 3 pieces. All of it belonged to Elias Cade. At 12:19 a.m., Cade dropped silently into a storage room that was supposed to be locked. A padlock lay on the floor, cut cleanly in 2. He changed out of his prison uniform with the calm precision of a surgeon, folding it neatly and placing it on a shelf as if he might come back for it later. When he looked in the cracked mirror over the sink, he barely recognized the man staring back at him. The sickness, the weakness, all of it fell away. This was the man who built a criminal empire without ever leaving a paper trail, who orchestrated international deals from a phone the size of a credit card, who turned a maximum security prison into the safest headquarters he had ever known. At 1:27 a.m., a fire alarm went off in the West Wing. It was small at first, just a flicker of red light, a single siren. Then the sprinklers came on, soaking the cells, forcing guards to scramble. In the chaos, Cade walked out of the storage room into the main corridor wearing a maintenance jacket and a cap pulled low over his eyes. No one looked at him. They were too busy running toward the smoke. By 1:34 a.m., he was in the back of the medical waste truck as it rolled through the outer gate. The guard who scanned the vehicle never saw the hidden compartment, never heard the steady, controlled breathing of the most wanted man in the building. At 2:10 a.m., the truck pulled off the highway and into an abandoned warehouse that once stored farm equipment. Inside, 3 men were waiting. They didn't speak as they handed Cade a phone, a coat, and a pair of glasses. The phone lit up with a map of the city, dotted with moving icons. Every one of those icons represented a person on the outside who owed Cade their loyalty, their freedom, or their life. While the prison scrambled to put out a fire that never really existed, Cade was already 3 steps ahead, already thinking about the next phase. Black Ridge was just the first door he had opened. At 3:45 a.m., a judge in Chicago received an email that would later be traced back to a server in Belarus. It contained documents proving that 2 major corporations were laundering money through offshore accounts controlled by shell companies Cade had set up years before. By the time the sun rose, the stock prices of those companies would begin to fall. By the time anyone realized why, Cade would be gone. At 5:12 a.m., a man in Sao Paulo woke up to find the encrypted wallet he thought only he controlled had been emptied. In Moscow, a hacker discovered that his entire network had been quietly rerouted. In Lagos, a shipment of untraceable weapons was diverted to a new buyer. All of it happened within minutes, coordinated through a web of digital pathways that all led back to one mind. Elias Cade had not just escaped a prison, he had re-entered a world that was already moving to his rhythm. At 6 a.m., when Harold Pike finally unlocked cell 317 and found nothing but a neatly made bed and a single sheet of paper left on the pillow, the realization hit him like a physical blow. The paper held a simple message written in precise, elegant handwriting. "Thank you for the quiet." By 6:07 a.m., the warden was on the phone with the Department of Justice. By 6:30 a.m., helicopters were in the air, roadblocks were set up. Every screen in the prison flashed red. But the truth was that they were all too late. Cade had designed the escape not as a single event, but as a cascade, a chain reaction that would keep everyone else chasing shadows while he disappeared into the spaces between systems. At 7:45 a.m., Cade stepped onto the private jet that had been waiting for him since midnight. The pilot didn't ask where they were going. He already knew. As the plane lifted into the morning sky, Cade looked out at the shrinking patchwork of land below, not with relief, but with anticipation. There was still work to be done. What the authorities would not understand until much later was that the escape was never the real story.
The real story was what came next.
Over the following days, as news of Cade's disappearance spread, a series of events began to unfold that seemed at first unrelated. A shipping conglomerate in Singapore announced a sudden change in leadership. A cryptocurrency exchange in Malta went offline without warning. A whistleblower in New York released files that implicated half a dozen powerful figures in crimes that had been buried for years. Each incident sent shockwaves through the global economy, and each one traced back through layers of shell companies and encrypted communications to the same invisible architect. Cade had built his criminal empire while locked inside a concrete box, using nothing but time, patience, and a network of people who believed he was untouchable. Now, with his physical freedom restored, that empire was expanding faster than anyone could track. At 11:30 p.m. on the third night after his escape, Cade sat alone in a penthouse overlooking a foreign city whose name he had never bothered to learn. The lights below looked like a circuit board, glowing lines of energy waiting to be manipulated. He spoke softly into his phone, issuing orders that would move millions of dollars, that would ruin reputations, that would rewrite the balance of power in industries that thought they were secure. Somewhere in a crowded newsroom, a reporter stared at a wall of evidence and felt a chill as a pattern began to emerge. Somewhere in a government office, a team of analysts realized that the man they had lost was not running, but advancing. But by the time those realizations solidified into action, Cade had already moved again. At 2 a.m., a new identity was activated. A new set of bank accounts came online. A new trail was laid, leading in exactly the wrong direction. Elias Cade had turned the world into his new prison, a place of locked doors and hidden corridors that only he knew how to navigate. And as the chase began, as the headlines screamed and the manhunt intensified, the most dangerous part of his escape was not the night he slipped through the walls of Blackridge, but the fact that no one could say with certainty where he was, what he was planning, or how far his reach truly extended. The silence that had once filled cell 317 now filled something much larger, something vast and undefined, a quiet that felt, to those who knew where to listen, like something was watching them from the dark.